A storyline that I don't hear much about. In the Ruthless Aggression era, the mid-carders somewhat took a backseat to the main eventers. The Attitude Era had some very memorable stories regardless of what position on the card, and while the Ruthless Aggression Era does kinda have this, it pales in comparison. When we talk about these memorable storylines, we mentioned MVP and Kennedy against the Brothers of Destruction, Trish Stratus and Mickie James, Edge and Matt Hardy, and then there's Billy Kidman's heel turn. One of the reasons why it's not talked about is because it's very short. Kidman went from a happy and confident babyface to a man who didn't even know why he was a wrestler. All of this because of an injury, and instead of the fans backing him up, they wanted him to go for a move that was proven dangerous. It was a nice change of pace for Billy, and it provided him a fresh restart after a couple of years. But how did it get to this point? Well, around here, Kidman was teaming up with Paul London. They were racking up victories, but it wasn't until after WrestleMania that the duo did something. London and Kidman spent more time in the air than on the ground. The team was mostly wrestling on velocity and taking L's, but then on the July 8, 2004 episode of SmackDown, they challenged for the WWE Tag Team Championships. The Dudley Boys were in form here and in kayfabe were considered the greatest tag team in the world. Paul London took a huge beating but refused to give up. Billy Kidman comes in, he's all fired up, almost untouchable, and the fans fully believed, but the Dudleys were trying to cast some doubts. That wasn't to be, and from out of nowhere, Bubba was knocked down, leading to the 450 splash, and they're the new champions. The commentary considered it a huge upset because these two basically lived on velocity. It wasn't like they weren't on SmackDown, but velocity was where it's at. The SmackDown roster was thin as hell and they needed some new blood in the tag team division. The Dudleys were close by, and after Bubba secured a victory over Billy Kidman, they got their rematch. To the champions, it was all about earning respect from the fans and others. They knew that they were good, but this belief had to be instilled into others. During this match, the champs had to work extra hard, and even then they needed external help from Rey Mysterio, who was attacked by the Dudleys earlier that night. This led to the roll-up, and the champions retained. They did the same thing with the Bashams the following week, but this was as good as it was gonna get. For one, Chavo Guerrero stole a victory in tag team action to, I assume, eventually challenge for the tag titles with Jamie Noble. Before that could go down, Chavo was set to face Kidman on the August 26, 2004 episode of SmackDown. During the match, Kidman hit the Shooting Star Press. When he landed, his knees landed directly onto Chavo's face. It looked ridiculous, and afterwards, Chavo was stiffer than an 80s wrestler. It's like his body was locked in position or something. Kidman's shooting star looked horrible. The way he executes it, it's like he gives up in the middle of the air. As a result of this, Chavo Guerrero suffered a concussion and was left sidelined for a while. Apparently, he was knocked out for 5 minutes, knocked out cold, was unaware of where he was for 20, and I believe this was the reason why WWE stopped allowing wrestlers to execute the Shooting Star Press. In light of Kidman's dangerous Shooting Star Press, Jamie Noble held Kidman responsible, and he spun it saying the move is well known for being dangerous. Noble gave him a stern talking saying that because of him, Chavo's career is possibly over, and the attitude that Kidman had slowly went away. He began putting some deep thought into it, and with that said, a tag match goes down. Kidman is in position for the Shooting Star Press but lacks the confidence. He began contemplating walking away, and this led to the victory for Nunzio and Stamboli. Then Heinrich gave London a beating afterwards. It went from bad to worse for the team as they lost the tag team titles. Once again, Kidman was in the same position, ready to win it with the Shooting Star Press, but his confidence hurts him, and this time he walked out on Paul London, who was already a wounded animal. All the challengers had to do was capitalize on the injury, and that's what they did. The commentary trashed Kidman for walking out on his partner who was battling an injury, and a while later an injured London confronted Kidman, who was essentially out of it. He didn't want to talk, and that one injury caused him to reconsider everything. The following week, Michael Cole interviewed the once happy high flyer, and Cole basically called him a quitter, and he took offense. He claimed that the reason why he walked away was to prevent another injury. He called himself the most misunderstood wrestler on SmackDown, and the reason why he doesn't go for the Shooting Star is simply because of injuries. Kidman didn't understand how he's a bad guy when he's trying to protect others. All of a sudden, Paul London respawned. I don't know where the hell he came from. And what London didn't understand is why he accepted the match but walked away when it mattered most. To him, Kidman quit. End of discussion. He responded with nothing, so London slapped the remorse out of him. At this point, this man was done. There's a reason why the saying "it ain't ballet" is mentioned so often, yet he refused to understand this. As a result of this, London and Kidman were set to face off on a special SmackDown episode. That match didn't even happen because Kidman pulled a Kidman and walked away. London was bloodthirsty, whereas he was a shadow of himself. Teddy Long didn't want a quitter on the roster and booked him in a match with Paul London for No Mercy, and if he decides to walk out, he'll be fired. It turns out this was more than enough to awaken Billy Kidman. It may have seemed like he was saving Paul London one night after a match with Booker T, and instead blasted him with a chair. No Mercy also proved to be the beginning of Billy Kidman's violent heel run. For one, he started wearing a robe like he's a wrestler from the late 80s, and two, he was more aggressive than previously. The match was befitting of a two ex-friends storyline. It was solid, fast-paced, aggressive, all that. Then Kidman had the match won, but again, he couldn't do the Shooting Star Press. But hey, he realized that he was getting fired, and this almost cost him. London instead wanted to do the Shooting Star, And it looked beautiful, but Kidman put his legs up. Then he's like, screw it, and successfully hits it. And it's like being scared of jumping into the cold water. You just gotta do it. That's what he did, and as a result of this, Billy Kidman was victorious, and Paul London was bleeding internally. Kidman then proceeded to blame the fans for all this. He's shouting, "You made me do it," and took it a step further. How's that? Well, he went for a second one. Taz is cursing him out, and I loved it. Everybody pushed Billy Kidman to this point. It was compassionate, and one injury was more than enough to hurt him. But after the fans were craving the move, he demonstrated the problems with it, and in doing so, he unlocked a vicious and violent side to him. His theme song describes him well at the time, faux DMX, saying society's labeling him, Billy Kidman, a threat, and they don't know what they're dealing with or something along the lines of that. I don't know, just go read it. Later that week on SmackDown, Kidman took it a little too far. During his match with Charlie Haas, Kidman had the match won when Jackie interfered. Since he was disconnected from reality, he dropped her with a BK bomb and was even ready to hit the shooting star press, but felt that the fans were undeserving. Now that's how you establish a heel character. It just looked so dangerous, and it's not because of his look or anything like that. It's his mind that's dangerous. An injured Charlie Haas wanted to avenge his fiancée, but his injury was a right target. He took a shooting star press right onto the knee, all while Jackie was screaming, and at this point, anytime you saw a stretcher, Billy Kidman was near. At the same time, Chavo Guerrero finally made his return, and he was giving out a speech about his injury when Billy Kidman, of all people, interrupted. He claimed that this incident brought them together because they're victims, and talked about how the fans turned on him over an accident, whereas he suffered an injury. Chavo looked furious, and he acknowledged how this is a tough business, and mentioned the ballet thing. Chavo described how his family were begging him to turn away, and he was very close, but an old friend helped him. He lured Billy in and told him that the friend ain't him. He delivered a beating and sent the man who injured him running. The following week, Kidman was ready to send him back to the injury reserve as he decided to interfere in Chavo's match with Nunzio. He was in perfect position, and he goes for it, but Chavo moved out of the way, and even then he won the match and stood tall. Kidman and Chavo's feud unfortunately fizzled out. It led to a match on Velocity, which Kidman won. London, meanwhile, finally got his victory back, and Chavo did as well about a month later, and unfortunately for him, he didn't do much on SmackDown from here on and was released in July of 2005. So there's the Billy Kidman heel run. Honestly, this run was amazing. It wasn't like amazing literally. What I loved about it is the fact that it had a slow burn. Kidman is remorseful. He regrets hitting the shooting star. As time goes on, people are pushing him around, and it got to the point where he's like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to show them, and even claimed that he wanted to injure Chavo on purpose, even though that wasn't the case, clearly. Negatives from the story, it ended too soon. Positives, Kidman was fresh. He was a fresh heel. I feel like he could have been in the mid-card scene with this character, injuring people every once in a while. And, he's not the best wrestler on the roster or anything like that. He was talented in-ring, and it was a nice change for him. All right, what do you guys think of Billy Kidman's heel run? Please comment down below, and that's it for his video. Make sure you hit the BK bomb on the like button, or perhaps the shooting star press on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.